It's common to experience a range of emotions throughout your financial journey. Depending on your circumstances, you may feel anxious, stressed, fearful, or guilty. At other times, you could feel empowered, hopeful, or at peace. What you feel could be just as complex as what you're going through. I'm your host, Melissa Mazard. Tune into Financial Feels as my guests share their personal stories with money, the lessons they've learned, and the emotions they felt along the way. Despite the many benefits offered for military service, money can be just as complicated for military members and their families. The complexity is often compounded by obstructive financial beliefs and behaviors. This episode's guest shares his journey through the military and with money, and with having to overcome destructive financial habits. This is a good one.
My first memory of money would have to be putting money, or I guess envelopes, into the overnight deposit box at the local bank. I don't even know if this is something that other banks have, but I can remember the sound of this thing too. Like it's almost like B-rate horror movies where there's the swing and it's just making that like weird squeak sound. That's kind of the sound that it would make. And then it had just a, like a little like slam shut, but you would just put the envelope in and it would drop down in there. But I think that's the first thing that I really remember about money was just going with mom. And a lot of times my job was to take the envelope out, shove it in there and let it fall down. And that was how we deposited money a lot of times. I don't know that I really knew like at first kind of like the whole deal, but eventually I kind of figured out that like, okay, cool, this money has to get into the checking account because there's checks that have been written. And if that money doesn't get in there, then check's going to bounce. Like there's got to be like I guess I knew eventually that money had to be in the account in order for money to be spent. So I guess it was kind of a beating the checks that were written to the bank, so to speak. I can't remember exactly how I figured out or when I figured out that that's how that kind of system worked. I just knew that you put money into the bank with the overnight deposit box and you wrote checks and that's how you got stuff. We were not the lowest on the totem pole, so to speak, but we definitely didn't have a lot of extra stuff. So homemade clothes, hand-me-down clothes, were definitely a thing. Mom and dad both worked a lot to kind of make things work. My dad worked at a lumber yard and then also did construction and built houses and things on the side. And then my mom, and I think, she's kind of where I got a lot of my entrepreneur, like kind of hustle mentality is she always had several different things going on. She was a dog groomer, but then she also was a seamstress. And so she would do different things like that. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't an abundance of money, I guess you would say, growing up. Bread and gravy was definitely a common meal. We went to the food bank and we would volunteer there and help out. And then, we'd take some food home as well. So there definitely wasn't, like I said, there wasn't an abundance, but I don't think that we ever felt like there was always food to eat. Like we never went hungry or anything like that. We always had clothes, but there was not any frills. There was no big vacations, anything like that. I don't think that the financial status of our house really affected me too much per se, just because almost everybody else around was in a pretty similar situation. There were some that had, you could tell they had a little bit more stuff, like they had Nikes, things like that. But yeah, nothing. It wasn't like a big stark contrast between me and any of my friends, really. So my first job really was I helped my mom with doing sewing. She had an embroidery machine, and I would get I want to say that if I completed a patch, so like once I put it on, and these were patches she would make a lot of times in the evenings or whatnot, but once I was old enough, she could kind of get me started on making these patches and then she could go groom dogs or whatever. But these were patches for like Letterman jackets and things like that custom embroidery. And I think I remember getting maybe 50 cents or $1 a patch. So that was probably like the first money I made like that. But I had a ton of different jobs, a ton of different hustles. I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur, but really that's what I was. I mean, from the time that I was 12 on, I worked at the lumber yard during the summer, where my dad worked. I would, go and work there, and I got an actual paycheck from there. I mowed lawns. I kind of, I guess, taught myself how to weld, and I would make like little horseshoe crafts and I would sell those. I worked at my aunt and uncle's Christmas tree farm. I worked at another Christmas tree farm. Um, where I worked for a plumber. I worked so many different places. Worked at a market research company. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but I don't think you want to talk about all of my little hustles that I've had. But I've had a lot. I just kind of figured out like if I wanted nicer things, then I had to go make money. The first big purchase that I made with money like that, I was fairly young, but I was playing basketball and I really wanted a pair of Nike basketball shoes. And so like went and made money, and I remember going to J.C. Penney and buying these. I think they were called Son of Glove, is what they were called. They were like the ones that zipped up in the front. I thought those were super cool. So that was like my first like big purchase I can remember like for myself with money that I made for myself. I'm sure I did pick up on some habits from family and things like that, but I was pretty extreme with like I guess my spending and stuff like that. I just wanted a lot of things, and so like a lot of my money ended up going to some good things, not some not so good things. So I was kind of a little bit of a partier whenever I was younger. Alcohol, cigarettes, things like that. I definitely bought plenty of that kind of stuff. And then I had the Columbia House membership. I had tons of CDs and DVDs, car speakers, all that kind of stuff. I just more or less just impress friends and go and have a good time with people. I'm a very sociable person, so I guess that kind of drove a lot of my spending in that regard. The reason why I joined the military or joined the army, there's a couple different things. So one, I kind of knew that there wasn't a lot of opportunity where I was from. I mean, we're really from the middle of nowhere, Missouri. I mean, it's pretty much if there's a factory job, there are some factory jobs and things around there. Go work at the lumberyard with my dad or whatever. And I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to do something more than that. But I also didn't want to go to college because I hated high school. I really saw college as like harder high school that I had to pay for. I was like that doesn't seem cool to me. But everybody was saying, hey, I mean, of course, I graduated high school. It was 2005, and so everybody was like still like, hey, computers, like all that kind of stuff. That's you've got to get into tech. Tech's the way the way of the future, whatever. So like, okay, well, Army recruiter called me one day on my lunch break and like, hey, you ever thought about military service? So like. I mean, kind of, I guess. Like, I don't know. And so one thing led to another, and they said, "Hey, yeah, you can do tech jobs in there." I scored high on the ASVAB, and yeah, so that's what I did. I joined in between my junior and senior year of high school. I left right after I graduated. It wasn't necessarily that I had thought about joining the military as a little kid. Like, I really didn't have any relatives that were in service other than my Uncle Ted that was in Vietnam, but he didn't have a very good time. So I don't think he really wanted me to do it, but I mean, he supported me as well. I knew I was going to deploy just because, I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but they were gearing up for the surge in Iraq. And luckily, I had great recruiters and they told me, hey, man, like, we're not going to say that you're not going to deploy, but you're probably going to deploy, man. Yeah, everybody's going right now. So and I'm really thankful for that. I mean, they were square with me and really just told me like, hey, yeah, like you're probably going to go. I mean, I was actually good with that. Now, I didn't really know what that meant really. So I'm pretty naive, but yeah, I mean, I knew that I was going to probably deploy at some point, and I don't know, it just seemed like something really interesting to do. I guess it really depends on where you're at. Some places feel like military makes a lot of money. There's other people that think that military don't make a lot of money, and it boils down to perspective. Where I come from, everybody, yeah, they definitely think, yeah, military, like, oh, you got that steady paycheck, you're gonna get that pension, like you're set for life kind of thing or whatever. It's not really quite like that, especially whenever a lot of the places that you're moving to are very high cost of living. So that was definitely an adjustment for me. But I don't think that I don't know that I really understood the financial aspects of military service. I just knew that I was going to get a paycheck. I knew that I was going to get college paid for through the GI Bill. And that was kind of a bargaining chip for some of my family members that really wanted me to go to college. So that kind of helped out a little bit because a lot of them were like, hey, you're really smart. You should go to college. I just wasn't interested in. Now, joke's on me because as soon as I got in the Army, they're like, hey, we want you to take college courses so you can get promoted. I was like, oh, of course. But at least they paid for it. Military service, depending on where you're coming from, for me, it's definitely been a great monetary benefit. It could have been better if I had been smarter with my money sooner, like all those spending habits and things like that I already had. As soon as I got money, I spent it. And that was something too. I kind of already knew that if you wanted to make a big purchase, then debt was pretty much how I was accustomed to doing that. If you wanted to buy a vehicle, you go to the bank, you ask to get a loan, whatever they get you a loan for, then that's how much truck you can buy. I just continued to do that same thing. I think my first deployment, which was to Iraq, I want to say I think I had 6 credit cards maxed. I had a Jeep loan. I had financed our wedding ring set. I wanted a laptop before I went on deployment because I wanted to, have something to save pictures on, have music on, all that kind of stuff. So we went to the Best Buy. I remember my wife and I both filling out the application. And I think I got approved. She didn't, or maybe I got approved for more, but I think I got approved for like an $800 Best Buy card. And then they give you like the little receipt with the card number on it. So I literally applied and maxed that thing in the exact same day. So yeah, so that was like a month before I deployed. So yeah, I definitely piled on as much debt as I could get away with. My wife and we actually balance each other out fairly well now. Initially in the relationship, I was the one that made all the money and I was the one that spent all the money. And she pretty much just as long as everything was covered, as long as we could pay the bills, and she was good with it. And she did get jobs and try and help out and things like that. But it's pretty tough whenever you're moving around and all that kind of stuff. So she kind of she's worked all kinds of different places. I'm just trying to kind of bring in a little bit of income. She's worked at Home Depot there for a while. She was I guess you would call it a coach for people with special needs. Like whenever they go and have jobs that they're able to do, she would go around with them. And she worked at a bank as a teller. She's, worked at the commissary for a little while. So, just, little odds and ends, but we just didn't have a whole lot of education. It's not that we were dumb or anything. It's just like we didn't think about what we're supposed to be doing. We didn't think about the long-term consequences of that debt. Like we both grew up very close to each other as far as we went to same high school, all that kind of stuff, similar backgrounds, and just came from a place where everybody pretty much just, you're going to work until you die kind of thing. And so like it was just, that was just normal. As long as you can make all the payments, then you were good. But later on, we kind of figured out that this doesn't really work that well, especially I guess it would have been right after my first deployment. That's when we were actually putting rent on a credit card there for a little bit. I still remember that. I didn't even know if we could pay rent. Like I had to walk down to the office and ask the lady, like, hey, will you take a credit card? And they did. So I was like, okay, so that's what we did. But at that point, I don't think I had that big of a credit limit. So it probably think maybe that was like a month or maybe 2 months that we kind of did that. We ended up just getting moved back on post because like we're like, oh, we got to do something. We can't do this. The real big turning point for us on our financial journey didn't come for quite a while, actually, because we were able to kind of get that band-aid on the situation by moving on post. And it wasn't too long after that I got promoted. So I got a little bit more money. And so we were kind of good there for a little while. But then lifestyle creep, I got a truck, got her a newer Jeep and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until like the big kind of turning point, we bought a brand new Silverado. It's kind of funny now, talking about it. I had a truck that I really liked. She had her Jeep that she really liked. I got orders to Germany and we could only ship one vehicle. And so our quote unquote compromise was to instead go buy a brand new crew cab pickup. Financed it was $40,000 truck. At the time, I probably didn't even make $40,000 a year. So it's a little crazy to me to even think that we got financed for that. And then ended up having to refinance it right away because the bank wouldn't let us take it to Germany. So that was a whole nother deal that I had to go through. But anyway, fast forward, I was sitting in a cold, stinky tent in Afghanistan looking through bank statements, and I realized that I was going to pay like $7,000 in interest over the course of that truck loan. And that was really kind of my big aha, like I'm going to pay $7,000 in interest For what? Just to use my money sooner? And I could have almost bought the truck that I had before that I loved. Her name was Marlia. It was a silver F-150. And I could have almost bought Marlia for that same amount of cash. I think I bought that truck initially for like $9,500 or something like that. So I was like, that's crazy. This is nuts. And so then I started to kind of research it. And I found a blog called Get Rich Slowly. I think I read every article on that website at the time. That led me to the Dave Ramsey Total Money Makeover book. And whenever I got home from Afghanistan, I was like, hey, sweetie, we're going to go debt free. She's like, wait, what? Actually, I think her first thing that she said was, if we don't take out a loan, how will we ever get anything nice? So that was kind of like where we were at that point is, all right, like, how is this possible without debt? The Total Money Makeover was really the big start, and then the other was just that blog Get Rich Slowly. I mean, those were really the two main sources of information for us. And I mean, the Total Money Makeover, I mean, we literally, I would read a chapter, then and she would read a chapter, and we did that for the whole book. We would discuss it and go, okay, cool, we'll implement this. We're not going to do that. We'll implement this. We'll kind of do that. We didn't follow it to a T. We were kind of what he would call Dave-ish. We're not going to not go do anything. We were living in Germany at the time. We kind of knew that we would never be childless 20 somethings in Germany ever again. And so we kind of knew we need to kind of capitalize on that. And I'm glad that we did that. We didn't go and do anything crazy. I mean, we still spent most weekends just walking around and doing cheap things and all that. But we did go on a cruise and different things like that while we were getting out of debt. And so really, yeah, we just used that resource. And then, like I said, the Get Rich Slowly blog, like I remember we implemented Money Day, from his blog, and we've done it ever since. And so that's kind of like an annual check-in to see where we're at and all that kind of stuff. And so we've really just kind of just kept that going and slowly built up over time. We've also figured out, I guess, our money types or whatever. Like she's definitely a natural saver, whereas I'm a natural spender, but she's very money avoidant. I'm more of like that money worship. I'm all about making more money and all that. Hey, don't worry about spending money because I can just make more tomorrow. Very confident, little cocky like that. Or she's much more like, hey, I don't want to spend money because I don't want to not have money, because she grew up in that kind of scarcity setting as well. But we've come around quite a bit as far as being able to talk about money and plan things long term. The evolution of our managing money, we've kind of gone through a few different iterations of things, but really what we've ended up kind of landing on, I guess, partly by accident, but just by trial and error. And then eventually I went to school for financial planning and all that. So that kind of helped out a little bit with kind of understanding, like, I do certain things with money because I have these money scripts and different things like that that kind of tell me, hey, this is just what feels natural to me. And so over the years, we've kind of built different systems and habits that have really helped us kind of keep things on track without making a lot of work. So like we budget maybe a little bit differently than some other people, but we kind of have I guess, a hybrid system to where we do a lot of automation. So have things just automatically get paid and all that kind of stuff. We also have envelopes that we use for a lot of different expenses. And then everything kind of gets decided by a master Excel spreadsheet that that we update. Actually, we really only update it about annually, or if there's like a major change. So like if we move to a different duty station or something like that, then obviously our expenses will change a little bit. But really, I mean, I would say we've kind of slowly developed a pretty smooth system for us. It just works out. We have to do things that kind of, I guess, kind of work with both of our personalities. Say, for instance, we can't leave any money in the checking that I can't spend. Otherwise, I will spend it. But also, too, we need to leave money in some accounts that my wife can see so she knows, okay, cool, we have money. We're not spending all the money. We're okay. And so it really is kind of a balancing act between our two personalities and how we interact with money. I actually wrote a letter to myself, to my 18-year-old self, and published it on my blog because I had thought about that. And it just boiled down to starting to save sooner, not dealing with debt and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest things that keeps people from getting control of their finances is kind of that either analysis paralysis or just not knowing where to start. And I would say just get started, just do something, whether that's opening up a high yield savings account, just looking at budgeting apps or download a budgeting template or something like that. That's kind of my big thing is just do a little something and then you can kind of build with that over time because that momentum, it really is helpful. Me, as far as like what I'm doing in the finance industry, all that kind of stuff I do in the margins. I'm still serving, and so I'm looking to retire here in the next couple of years and move into this kind of stuff full time. But I do paraplanning and content writing for financial advisors, but then I also run my own blog, Enlisted Money, and really that's just, kind of I guess you would say it's a passion project, so to speak, but really I'm trying to build the content that I wish I would have consumed and applied whenever I was 18 years old. So I'm a big believer that experience is cheap if you're smart enough to get it secondhand. So I'm trying to provide that guidance and those stories and things like that so that people don't have to make all those mistakes on their own. They can just learn from me because I've already made plenty of them. Yeah, if people want to see what I'm doing or connect with me, the best ways to do that is on my website, sign up for the newsletter there, or on Instagram. I'm on there quite a bit. My Instagram handle is @enlistedmoneyguy, and and the website's just enlistedmoney.com. Thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I hadn't thought about a lot of this stuff in quite some time, so it's been a nice little walk down memory lane.
Thank you, Brandon, for sharing about your journey, including the lessons you've learned and the growth you've experienced with money. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Season 1 of Financial Feels. We're taking the summer off, but Season 2 will begin in September, where we'll be back with more stories about money. Stay tuned for lots of changes with the podcast as well. In the meantime, you can find me on Instagram @ProsperWithMel. Thank you again for all of your support.